Hello and welcome to Merlin's Manor for another Game Mechanics Monday. Today I'm going over the mechanism known as hand management and some games that do this mechanism well. Now what is hand management? Games that have this mechanism involve a hand of cards and often have you deciding how best to utilize those cards. This is different from deck building as you have a hand that carries over from round to round that you are slowly adding to the hand and using the cards that are in your hand rather than cycling cards and using them over and over again like in deck building. These games sometimes have hand limits which require you to consider how important cards are or even a cost to acquire cards that will have you considering the importance of those cards. The way games use these cards varies greatly. Some focus on keeping cards in hand for endgame scoring, while others have you playing cards each round, and others have you using resources to play cards into a tableau for points or ongoing benefits. Some games even provide multiple uses for cards and even provide a benefit when discarding cards instead of using them for their primary purpose. How well you manage your hand will often make a big impact on whether you win or lose in these games. And so let's consider some of the different ways hand management is done by looking at some of the games that do this mechanism well. And the first one I'm going to start with is actually a couple that are very similar, and that's Red Rising and Fantasy Realms. These are one of the more unique ways that hand management is done. In these games, you have a hand of cards that generally stays the same size, although there are some cards that can increase your hand size in Red Rising. In these games, you are actually trying to construct an ideal hand for endgame scoring. As you play cards, you will get a benefit for playing them, but ultimately you are focusing on comboing within your hand of cards and keeping the cards that will give you the most victory points at the end of the game. You'll have some cards that rely on other cards in order to score more points, and even some cards that do not want to be with other cards or card types that will lose you points if they're combined with certain cards. You're constantly having to reassess your hand and which cards you want to keep based on what you are able to find. And as new combos show up, you may find yourself pivoting to a new strategy. Or if you are holding out for a certain card to come up and it just has not come up, you may need to give up on that one card that had a high potential but just is not looking like it will hit that potential. This is a fun style of hand management which is really all about the hand management. Although Red Rising does add some other mechanisms to focus on as well, as you're trying to go up on a track for points, you're trying to gain helium for points, and other things which will add to the points that you're scoring from the end game hand that you wind up with. Now let's talk about the next game that does hand management well, and that is Three Dragon Annie. This is a straight-up card game where you're going to be playing 3 cards per round, at least typically. And you start out with 6 cards and will only get 2 new cards each round, but there are other ways to gain cards, or you can even find yourself having to pay in order to get more cards. In this game, you'll be playing cards with different strength represented by the numbers in the corner, and the person who has the highest value with all 3 cards added together usually wins the gambit, which means they get all the money that has been put into the pot in the middle. You'll also be playing cards for their abilities to activate if you can play a lower number than the person before you played. So there are reasons to play low as well. In this game, you have to carefully strategize when you're going to try to win the gambit and when you're going to try to bide your time and hold on to your most powerful dragons and mortals for later on, and how you're going to utilize the dragon powers that you can activate. To throw another wrinkle into the hand management strategy, you can also get bonuses for playing 3 of the same color dragon or 3 of the same strength, that is the same number dragon. So if you have 2 of a color or 2 of a number, then you might want to hold on to those cards for later, hoping you can get the 3rd one. This is a really fun, lightweight game that really focuses on hand management and a decent amount of luck as to which dragons and which mortals come your way in order to win the game. Now, the next one I want to talk about is Gloomhaven. I have Jaws of the Lion standing in here for that. I really could not do a video on hand management without talking about Gloomhaven, simply because it has a unique way of doing hand management. In Gloomhaven, you have a hand of cards that are specific to your character, which you'll be leveling up to get better cards throughout the campaign. You can bring a certain amount of cards in each game based on your character's stamina. You'll be playing 2 cards each round to do 2 actions. Each card has a top action and a bottom action, and you'll use one of the cards for its top action and one for its bottom action. You don't have to choose which you're going to use for which prior to your turn, and what others do may cause you to switch up which one you use for the top and which one you use for the bottom. What is especially interesting about this game as relates to hand management is that your hand of cards represents your stamina, and every time you rest, you have to get rid of a card. If you short rest, it's a random card, and if you long rest, it's a card of your choice. And as you play cards, they will be discarded, and then when you don't have 2 cards to play, you must rest and lose a card for the rest of the game. So you'll slowly be getting rid of actions that you can do, and you're getting to where you have to rest more and more often. In addition to this, you have some more powerful abilities which require you to straight up lose that card when you use it. It doesn't go to your discard. This means your stamina takes an immediate 1-card hit for using that power. You don't have to use the card for its power, as you can always use the alternate side or even the basic attack for the top or the basic move for the bottom. And so you must strategically decide when it's worth using the powerful ability, which is going to shorten your game considerably, but maybe worth it. You can also lose a card to negate any amount of damage, but you really don't want to do this unless you get hit hard or absolutely have to, because again, you're shortening how long you can last in the game when you do that. Whenever you do not have 2 cards to play, your character is exhausted and out of the game. If everyone exhausts before achieving the goal, the game is lost. And so in this game, you have to carefully manage your hand, playing the right cards at the right time to be as efficient as possible, and carefully timing your use of powers that result in losing cards, and even making careful decisions about when it's best to lose a card to avoid taking damage. And so that is Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. So the next game I want to talk about is Wormspan. And Wormspan, you start out with a few cards that you are going to be trying to play down into a tableau for points and abilities that you can trigger in various ways throughout the game. And then in order to get more, you are often going to have to spend an action to acquire those extra cards. You need to decide which cards are worth playing and how you're going to efficiently get the resources required for playing them. You also have the decision space of potentially utilizing the cards in your hand to tuck for points when activating abilities, or sometimes discarding cards in order to get another benefit. Of course, if you really wanted to play a card, it hurts sometimes to not be able to utilize a power. Maybe you should have gone and gotten more cards to be fodder for those powers, but then that would take another action, and is that the most efficient use of your actions? There is some good push and pull at times between gathering cards to play and gathering cards to use in other ways, and how efficient your card gathering engines are in these games may determine how easy you can get extra cards. Wormspan actually has 2 types of cards for you to focus on getting. You have dragon cards, which you play into your tableau for endgame points and abilities that activate either when played, end round, end of game, or when you explore the cave that they are in. And then you have cave cards, which you must play in order to play dragons after the first column of cave spaces, in which these cave cards provide an instant ability. Both sets of cards can be used in ways other than playing them, including for some endgame abilities from dragons, using them to score points by having them at the end of the game. Wormspan also has a max hand limit of 9 cards total, so you cannot focus on gathering a whole bunch of cards to use in various ways. So that is Wormspan. Okay, the next game I'm going to talk about is Terraforming Mars, and I have Ares Expedition standing in here, but I want to talk primarily about the original Terraforming Mars because I think it even more has you focus on that hand management. In Terraforming Mars, you have to pay for the cards you keep. You are dealt 10 cards at the beginning of the game, and then you pay 3 mega credits for each card you choose to keep. So you have to evaluate very carefully what card you're going to be able to play and are going to be useful to you. Then between each generation, you'll have 4 cards that you can buy for 3 credits apiece. After you buy the card, they're added to your hand, and then you'll have to pay the listed cost on the card in order to play them. If at any time you decide you don't need the card you bought for 3 credits, you can always sell it for 1 credit. That's a loss of 2, so you have to be careful about which ones you're going to purchase. There are also ways to get free card draws throughout the game, and then you can either use them at some point or sell them for a profit of a credit if you got that free card that way. After exercising care and buying cards, you have to work out what order you're going to play them, both based on the value of getting them out earlier, as well as your ability to get them out. Plus, there are some cards which will make future cards cheaper or which will gain you benefits from playing other cards after them. So you'll want to keep those combos in mind when choosing when to play your cards. The decision space around when to buy cards, when to sell cards, and when to play cards provides a great strategical hand management challenge. And so that is Terraforming Mars. And the last one that I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to use the cover here, and that's Everdell. Finally, we have Everdell. Everdell has you spending resources in order to play cards into a tableau in order to score points and gain benefits. You can play both from your hand and from a meadow. The meadow is available, though, to all players, so there's no guarantee that the card you want to play will still be there when you can afford to play it. Everdell adds an extra wrinkle to hand management in that it has a hard hand limit of 8 cards, which you cannot go above at all for any reason. Most games with hand limits allow you to go above and then discard down at the end of your turn, but in Everdell, if a draw would take you above your hand limit, you simply cannot draw those cards. And there are some abilities that require you to be able to draw cards in order to even use those abilities. So you need to make sure you have the space in your hand to draw before attempting to use those abilities. Everdell also provides ways to discard cards for benefits. One place you can go has you get a resource for every 2 cards that you discard. A great way to empty your hand while also getting some things that you need in order to play cards. In fall, you can go on a journey to discard cards for points. You can get 2 to 5 points depending on how many cards you discard. You also find yourself sometimes giving cards to other players to get points or resources. There's also a spot you can go to discard as many cards as you want and then draw up to hand limit. Everdell is a game that is equal parts worker placement, resource management, and hand management. These are 7 games that do hand management well. What are your favorite hand management games? Let me know in the comments down below. And check out some of these other game mechanism videos. We have one here that is on resource management, and we have another one here that is on worker placement. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and game on.